rights.
My hot button issue is the First Amendment. And that's the thing that really got me fired up to even get involved in the political process in the first place. The violation of my First Amendment rights. And the biggest violation of our First Amendment rights comes through hate crimes legislation, hate speech legislation that attempts to limit our ability to have a voice and an opinion in the open marketplace.
The only protections we've ever had have been the rights we claim for ourselves. And if you look at the Revolutionary War, we had to say this is our right and this is what we'll tolerate and this is what we won't. Now, what caused the Revolutionary War was far less egregious than what they're doing to us now. I believe if we could roll the tape back to 200 years ago, our founding fathers would laugh at the debates we're having today. And they'd also cry at the idea that we're throwing it all in the trash.
They had just escaped tyranny. They had just escaped a government that had become far too powerful and had no regard for the rights of its citizens. And so when the Founding Fathers gave us the Second Amendment, you know, as many people like to say, the Second Amendment is there to make sure that the rest of the amendments, the rest of the Bill of Rights, is remembered.
We had two amendments, the 16th and the 17th, that were ratified that really destroyed the very fabric of state sovereignty. And this 16th Amendment being what most people understand as the income tax amendment. And the 17th is the one that changed senators from being elected as state representatives to actually being represented by the people.
As far as the 17th Amendment goes, the original intention of the Founding Fathers was for the senators to be appointed by the state legislature. This would allow for them to do a recall at any time. If the senators, say when they voted for the bailout, we could have immediately recalled them while the people were up in arms, where they were passionate about the issue. But what happens is this empowers central planning and strong central government, because now we have to wait for the next election cycle, and by then people have lost sight of what it was. They've lost distraction with our short-term attention spans now.
In our system of government, the states are to have the ultimate checkmate against executive abuse of power. Until we got the Federal Reserve Act and the 17th Amendment in 1913, the states appointed U.S. senators. The people elected the state legislators, and then they would send the U.S. senators to Congress. And so the states had full control over the Congress because they appointed the senators. When they began to elect the senators at large, the senators could now be taken away to Washington and bought off by special interest and by offshore banks and by the military-industrial complex. And that's when you see the real corruption setting in. It is the states that are above the federal government, because the states represent the body of the people, and those state legislatures represent the body of the people.
The same things came back through the environmental movement, and because they have used scare tactics, Chicken Little tactics, that the sky is falling, global warming, all of this, that if we don't do something about it, then we're going to lose our planet Earth and we'll lose our home and it's all destruction on us. All those scare tactics have gotten people to take their liberties and throw them on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning, all in the name of protecting the environment.
The federal government gets and grabs hold of most of the power that they have throughout our history through tragedies, or very traumatic times, in our nation's history. The latest, of course, being 9/11, and the overreaching, of some of the law enforcement powers that the federal government has come because of fear.
He was fired at, burned with cigarette butts, pierced with a nail in his right foot, and severely beaten with an electric baton. The wounds and bruise marks visible on his body is a testimony of the brutality he was subjected to by the Chinese authorities.
In Russia, they don't allow protest except for free speech zones. The United States has adopted that. In communist China, they only allow authorized demonstrations. We now have the same system here. And if you notice, our media doesn't criticize Russia's tyranny or China's oppression anymore, because they would look like hypocrites if they did. In the past, our government would criticize the North Vietnamese or the North Koreans or Fidel Castro for torturing people. Now, you don't hear them criticizing authoritarians and despots around the world, because our government is doing everything that dictators do, as if they're going down a checklist of every horrible thing that corrupt regimes do, and trying to even go further than tyrants have in the past.
George Bush was correct when he indicated that the Constitution is only a piece of paper. And if people do not know the ideas, if they don't read the Constitution, if those ideas are not protected and enforced, then the Constitution could theoretically be a perfect piece of paper with perfect ideas, and they would be irrelevant. If you want to know how much protection the Constitution gives you, I challenge you to stand on a railroad track with a train coming and hold up a copy of the Constitution as your protection. And you will discover in very short order that the Constitution will afford you essentially no protection whatsoever.
No, absolutely not. I will never take a mandatory vaccination. Ever, ever, ever.
Well, I might not know exactly what I'd do until that time comes, but I can tell you this, I wouldn't be taking the vaccine, and there might be shooting that day.
That's why there's 200 million guns in the United States. I mean, I've got, we are the ones, I truly believe we are the ones as individuals who can make the best determinations for what's best for our families. No third party, no interest that has any other interest but your interest is going to be able to make those decisions on your behalf. And if you cede those decisions onto somebody else, then you are risking extermination ultimately. And so, if that's the case, then I'm going to do what I need to do to protect my family.
Well, we don't know that. That's another big question and problem with the bigger question that we're discussing here, and that is the increased level of control by the federal government to dictate to citizens everything. It's incrementally that we go down the path. But when that time comes, the big question is, what's the state going to do? And so I finally decided and realized we needed a process in our state, and I think every state needs this, to be able to address that. So I've introduced another bill that will address that problem of how do legislators, how do the people quickly, efficiently react to unconstitutional acts that the federal government takes. We talked about putting teeth in the Constitution by funneling the federal tax dollars through the state, then the state could pass it on. We also need a mechanism in which state legislators can easily bring a question before the House or the Senate, the legislature, address that issue that's unconstitutional, they believe is unconstitutional, and then be able to address it publicly, openly, and vote it up or down.
Again, I sincerely hope that our government has not gotten so corrupt that we have government agents in this country willing to come to my door armed, with the intention of incarcerating me and giving me some mandatory vaccination, because I will resist with every ounce of force that I am capable of generating, which is considerable. My very first question during my presidential campaign was relative to the anthrax scare that was prevalent at the time. And the question was, Mr. Badnarik, what is your position on mandatory vaccinations? And because I was a very new candidate, I hadn't learned how to couch my answers diplomatically. As an engineer, under moments of stress, I still blurted out the truth. And my answer to the question was, you bring the syringe, I'll bring my .45, and we'll see who makes a bigger hole.